this week's program, we're going to be talking to Kerry Burke. We're also going to be working out when you use black fittings when it comes to irrigation, and talking to a chap about how you pick a steeplechaser and how you train them up. And in just a moment, it's animal health, prevention and cure. It's called foundering or founder.
Laminitis, so we're talking horses today. I thought it's been a while. So yeah, founder's a common name for a condition of the hoof called laminitis. We're seeing lots and lots of cases of this recently, and I don't know why, what's happened out there with the environmental temperatures and conditions of pasture, but we're just seeing a lot of it. Typically more prone in pony breeds and miniatures and small breeds of horse, but also I guess no equine is exempt from or immune from the condition, and overweight animals are very, very prone.
I was going to say, normally it's sort of too much clover and stuff, isn't it?
Traditionally we've almost classified most of the laminitis we see in New Zealand to pasture associated, and we've assumed that it's due to grazing pasture at certain times of the year where there's very high sugar levels in the pasture, which alters kind of gut flora or the type of bugs in the gut, which can change the vascular anatomy to the hoof and bypass the hoof as far as blood supply goes, and the end result is actually loss of the tissues that attach the hoof capsule to the pedal bone or the foot bone, and that results in an unstable foot bone and the bone sort of pushing down in the hoof capsule. It's a very, very painful condition. It's typically associated with the front feet, and we have a typical type of lameness where the animals are obviously trying to keep weight off their front legs, so they kind of lean back, if you like, and point their front legs. But the reason I wanted to bring it up is because we've seen a lot of unseasonal cases at the moment, and in recent times we've started to develop some more understanding around this disease, and perhaps I'm thinking that the majority, in fact, of these traditional pasture associated laminitis or founders probably aren't just what we used to think they were. And the biggest reason for that is the diagnosis or the understanding of a disease called equine metabolic syndrome. And what's quite interesting about this is that it's very, very analogous to type 2 diabetes in humans, and so it's caused through the effects of insulin not being able to do its job. And so we have some typical scenarios or clinical indicators of equine metabolic syndrome, one of which is recurrent laminitis, and laminitis cases that are very, very hard to control, even with a lot of work going in to try and control pasture access and things. And that's what initially got us scratching our heads about this disease, and that it wasn't quite as simple as what we thought. And we also end up with these horses and ponies getting really overweight. So currently there's a very good treatment strategy which involves exercise, diet, and in the really bad cases some medication. So if any of the watchers are thinking, well, you know, that's exactly what that old nag in the back paddocks like of mine, then perhaps it's worth talking to your veterinarian, because there's a very, very simplified way of making the diagnosis now, quite cheap and a little bit less dramatic than what we used to have to do, and very, very simple things can correct it.
It's interesting you should say about the sugar, because people that I keep coming across are saying, I used to have 2 spoonfuls of sugar in my coffee, now I have none and I'm losing weight.
Yeah. Well, I guess traditionally that's the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and so type 2 diabetics, like these horses, tend to be a little bit more overweight than underweight. But yeah, the laminitis associated is quite severe. And on top of, I guess, parallel to this condition is another disease of the hormones, what we call endocrine diseases, and that's a disease called equine Cushing's disease, and that's a problem derived from a gland at the base of the brain called the pituitary gland that produces an excess of a certain hormone, results in a lot of stress hormone circulating, cortisol circulating, and that's exceptionally common in older horses and ponies. In actual fact, some vets would say that any horse over the age of 30 is going to have this disease to some degree. And one of the hallmarks of Cushing's disease on top of excessive thirst is recurrent laminitis also. So between the two conditions, I think a lot of the more traditional causes of laminitis that we've initially worried about as being caused through pasture, I think a great proportion of them are probably tied up with one of these two diseases. And as we understand these more, there's more that can be done, and you know, we can, with advice from the veterinarian, we can probably improve the welfare and the functionability of these animals dramatically, as long as things are looked at properly.
You said that there's a test, a very simple test. Do you do that as of right, or do you do it when you're suspicious?
We would usually do it when we're suspicious, but that suspicion may be derived from, driven by the vet recurrently going out to see one of these animals with active laminitis and wondering why this is still happening when we're putting in place good pasture management and things.
Got them in a pen and eating straw.
Yeah, absolutely, or eating dirt sometimes with these little ponies. And some of the suspicion after what I've said today may be driven by the owner themselves, and it's very, very simple. Both conditions are diagnosed differently. Cushing's disease is very simple now. We've got a very new test that just involves one blood test, simple blood test sent off and checked, and that can make the diagnosis. And equine metabolic syndrome, that involves a couple of blood tests and just a little feed additive given, and then we'd make a second test a few hours later. And that's kind of, if anyone's watching has been through the checking for glucose metabolism and type 2 diabetes, I guess it's similar to what's called a glucose challenge test in people.
So that's the sugar, the amount of sugar in your blood.
It's actually measuring insulin levels and making sure that's an appropriate insulin secretion when you've got high blood sugars, so to keep the blood sugar level in the right range. And so if there's an inappropriate release of insulin, then that can be an indication of equine metabolic syndrome after we've given some glucose to the animal.
Nick, what about, you talked about the symptoms. Is there any cure? I mean, because you're talking about very, very painful feet.
Well, the big thing initially with clinical laminitis is to get rid of the inflammation, and that's usually twofold. Usually we use pain relieving drugs. We manage the foot so that it's padded, and after we've got rid of these acute symptoms, we have to be very mindful that the bone within the hoof capsule may have rotated on its axis.
Oh, charming.
Yeah, and if that happens, we need X-rays, and then we get involved with a farrier that's very proficient in corrective shoeing, and we can realign the hoof to the pedal bone once we've got the active phase of the inflammation out of the way. But some of these really bad cases are really bad, Robin. Sometimes, you know, unfortunately it does end up in euthanasia of the animal, because we can end up with horrible things, pedal bones poking through the sole of the foot, and some of the intervention methods that are needed are salvage techniques at best, and kind of not well developed or well used here, although I guess there's scope for us to get more proficient in these techniques as veterinarians. That involves releasing pus from the hoof capsule, taking hoof wall away, even the use of sterile maggots to debride and get rid of all the dead tissue within the hoof capsule. So some very good modern treatments that are just being looked at. But,
and some ancient ones.
Yeah, some ancient ones that have been reinvented, and that's true for a number of things with leech use and maggot use these days. Yeah.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. We're going to be staying with the subject of horses when we talk to Danny Crozier about how to train a steeplechaser. That's in a moment. So Danny, you're into the jumpers. That's very different to the flat horses.
Oh, for sure. You know, it's well, winter race can be boring without jumpers. A lot of work goes into one, getting them ready, more so than a flat horse. But you take a lot of satisfaction out of winning a jumping race, because the hard yards are going behind the scenes and educating them, and so.
How do you educate a horse into jumping?
Well, you start from the basics. You know, you start jumping over the smaller jumps. Gradually, as they get more confidence, you go a bit quicker and over the bigger jumps. So you're up to race day fences, and then you've got to qualify them for race day. But yeah, a lot of time and effort goes into it, but you reap the rewards, hopefully, at the end of it.
Now, you said qualifying, you need to qualify. Are there other races, or how do you qualify a horse for jumping?
No, you've got to qualify at the track here in front of the stipendary steward. You've got to jump 10 fences, 2 laps twice, and if the stewards are satisfied with the way the horses jump and they jump safe enough, they get their ticket, then they get to go to the races.
And I guess you're able to pick a horse and know that it's going to be a jumper?
Well, I'm lucky to be in a position of, grew up with jumpers, rode in Australia and been around the world jumping, riding over fences, and done a lot of school and a lot of trials in Australia, obviously, so I'm in the right position to know if a horse can jump or not. So, hopefully I've got a bit of an eye for one.
Danny, the rules and regulations have changed, which is sort of making jumping more popular. Is that because of money?
Yeah, well, they have cut out the amount of races so they can put more money into the stakes. So now a minimum stake now for maiden is 10,000 and 20 for an open chase or hurdle. So there's a resurgence now that the money's up, so there's an incentive for owners to have a jumper, and the numbers have picked up remarkably since this initiative has been introduced.
Now, you've been around horses and jumping for, a long time, I guess. The horses seem to really enjoy it.
Oh, they do, straight away. If a horse doesn't like jumping, you don't persevere. But you'll see a horse, unfortunately, if it falls or drops rider, they'll follow the field round most of the time and keep jumping on their own. They don't do that unless they enjoy it, do they?
So the preparation for a horse, when do you start your build up to the Winter Carnival?
Oh, the horses probably, you'd like to have 3 or 4 under their belt over hurdles for the National Carnival starts, because the testing tracks over extreme distances, so your horse got to be rock hard fit in that. So yeah, you'd like to have 3 or 4 under their belt before they hit National Week.
And the horses seem to go through the fences rather than over them.
Well, a good hurdle, a good jumper will go through them, because you jump too high, you spend too much time in the air, so you've just got to basically land running. So you want a horse to skim through them and land running the other side. That's where you make the ground, because you lose too much time in the air if you jump too big.
Now, as a jockey, are you the one who sort of sets up the footing before they get to the jump?
Well, you just have, like all good jump jockeys and even horses, you just have a good eye for a fence and be able to pick a stride 3 or 4 strides out. Basically, that's what it amounts to.
There must be a huge buzz as a jockey.
Oh, brilliant. But more nerves training them, because you're up in the grandstand, it's out of your hands when they leave the birdcage. Riding race day, you never worry about it, but when you're up there watching them, you're shaking like a leaf.
Still to come on the program, we're going to be talking about black pipes, and we're also going to be meeting up with Kerry Burke.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
Dave, I guess one of the things when it comes to stress is unexpected.
It certainly is, Rob. I just had a brief sort of example of that when I was over in Europe, just come back from Europe, and I had my 2 wee kids with me, and I very briefly lost sight of them at one of the airports, and the panic that overwhelmed me was just unbelievable. And I think it highlighted one of the, I suppose one of the aspects of farming and just being around people is, you know, when you don't know where someone is, for whatever reason, and if it's something maybe potentially disastrous, the panic that overwhelms you is just there. So radio does tend to give you that opportunity to keep in touch regardless of what's going on.
The imagination is very, very strong too. I mean, if somebody's half an hour late coming back, you start thinking the worst.
Absolutely. Look, we all have that voice inside our heads. It's constantly chatting away to us. It doesn't stop. And of course, something doesn't happen, the old mind starts saying, well, what's happened? Why isn't he here? Why isn't that happening? And of course, you create your own stories. So the simplest way to get through that is to be able to talk to that person, say, hey, where are you? Or what do you mean? Or, you know, ask the questions.
Because invariably, the person who's busily poking some sheep back into a paddock that they got out of because they're Perendales or whatever, I shouldn't have said that, should I? But, you know, I mean, that's time consuming.
Sure. Absolutely, and look, time is so important on the farm. Minimising the costs, but just keeping in touch with people. It just takes away all that stress, the unknown, and that's a really important part of modern business. To be honest, it's not just farming; it's manufacturing and so on.
I was on a farm recently that used cell phones. And I would suggest that the guy that I was with probably made about 11 phone calls to his 2 sons, all received the same number.
Yeah, that's right. And unfortunately, the dynamics of cellular, look, they're good in the city if you're wanting to talk to your mates or talk to other businesses, sure. But, you know, there's nothing worse when you're trying to get hold of someone for whatever reason, and it might be something very serious, or what time are we meeting for coffee? And you get high.
That can be serious.
Well, that's exactly. I've had many panicking moments, but that old chestnut, hi, you've reached Rob, I can't come to the phone right now. It's so frustrating because you want to get that answer, and that's where radio hits the straps. You push the button and you go, hey Rob, where are you? You can't hide from it. So, and of course now with modern technology, we've got a radio that can connect to a cell phone. So if you do disappear off the farm for a holiday in the Gold Coast, a break or in town, you can actually use your cell phone to talk to the radios back on the farm.
Really?
Absolutely, yeah. It's part of the new digital technology. Radios now have their own IP addresses and they can connect through the World Wide Web.
No, sorry, you lost me.
I know.
But then that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. So, yeah, so basically there's a hell of a lot of technology out there that you can tap into.
Look, it's getting, every day we're seeing new advancements. We have a new technology called wave technology, which allows the cell phone to connect to the radio, as I said, regardless of wherever you are. Greece, Surfers, Rangiora, doesn't matter. You can use that cell phone to talk to your radios and vice versa. So that allows the farmer or the farm partner to get out and do other business and still maintain a bit of contact with the farm if they need that. Or take the radio with you. We have a lot of farmers who take radios into town in their trucks and have them in their trucks. So it just means that you're not having that stress of not knowing what's going on and that little voice telling you that something bad's happening.
Yeah, because I heard a crash, I thought.
Yeah, well, look, you know, I mean, you know, we've got fires, danger in the summertime, we've got floods in the winter and so on. We've got all sorts of things going on, but just keeping in touch and saying, look, did you ask me to pick that up from farmlands, or did you ask me to pick that up? You know, just keeping those lines of communication open. And I think at the end of the day, that's the key. Communication, stopping all those stories and those preconceptions going on. You can just get right to the core of the question.
Because, you know, you think of something like some of the farm tracks that I've been taking over
I know.
You know,
Wow. Gee,
religions get very close to mine.
Yes, exactly. You start doing the sign of the cross and all sorts of things. Look, yeah, there's a lot of that goes on, especially up in the back country, up around the Lake Coleridge. You know, we've stuck a great repeater system up at Mount Algeta Station a while ago, and that's just saved them so much time, and the safety factor's gone to another level. They're just so happy that they can now talk to each other on such a beautiful but very potentially dangerous station in the high country, and that applies to any station in New Zealand. You know, just knowing that if something did go wrong, you can get on that radio.
A few years ago, you know, they were sort of fashionable and everybody had one, but that was before new technology. But obviously radios have kept up with their technology.
Yeah, Motorola worldwide is, for those that don't know, they invented the cell phone. So they have a lot of intellectual property going way back to when they first developed the cellular technology. And of course they were the first to invent the radio. First broadcast from the moon was on a Motorola radio. So they own a lot of stuff.
The range is pretty good then.
Yes, it is right. Have you seen anyone up there? But the thing about Motorola is that they're now converging. So what we're seeing now is a convergence of cellular to radio, radio to cellular. So Motorola are combining that. So now you've got the convenience of having a radio, or push the button and talk, and a mobile device as well.
So how do you pick up your radio on a cell phone? Does it ring or something?
Yeah, it rings, and I mean, for example, if you've got a radio, this is a little Motorola radio. You might have that over here, and you open up the little application on your cell phone, and hit that just like a push to talk on a radio, and you go, "Hey Rob, are you there?" And it goes through the internet and through our gateway, which we have around New Zealand, and boom, it hits the radio. So the radio now can talk back to the cell phone. So you're not restricted to having just radio to radio. You can merge them or combine them. And of course, if you have a number of employees, say 5 to 10, 20, 100 employees, the app will actually bring up all of your employees, and you can just push which employee you want to talk to. So you don't have to have everyone listening if you don't want to.
You've come a long way.
It's come a really long way.
You nearly slipped in. And of course, the neat thing is with a cell phone is you can actually look at our website on the land.co.nz, and then you can talk to somebody on the radio and say, "Hey, listen, when you get home, you've got to look at that."
Absolutely, yeah. Look, it's multifaceted, and it's the beautiful thing about technology. It's not all bad. You know, my kids love playing on my cell phone. They love playing games and that. But you know, at the end of the day, it's a work tool, and it's designed to save me money and save me time, and I do use it for that. And of course, the radio, that's the purest form, because I only have to push one button and talk to whoever people I want to talk to. If you look at CIAL, Christchurch International Airport, they've deployed some of the most advanced Motorola systems in the world, and we're very proud to be able to say, you know, to go out there and show the digital network working. It's seamless. It keeps everyone in contact, and you can well imagine there's many employees out there who need to be talking to each other. So
going back to drama, you used it for the earthquakes in your family.
Yes, I did. Look, after the big one, February, it was my first thought was panic. How are my children? How's my wife? I live out at North Canterbury. So after that, I had a radio sitting at my house in the kitchen, and of course we all know the terrible number of aftershocks. Some of them were, you know.
Some of them were earthquakes. They weren't aftershocks.
Oh yeah,
Dave.
And it was scary. But you know, Rob, the feeling of being able to just pick up my radio at my desk and go, "Karen, are you okay?" And her being able to say, "Yeah, I'm fine. Everything's cool." It was just amazing. The stress just fell off me because I could talk to them. Whereas the cellular technology, unfortunately, cell towers did fall over, batteries, you know, yeah, that sort of thing. So I just had that constant communication with my wife, regardless of where I was.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much indeed. Obviously, communication, vital. Still to come on the program, we're going to be talking with Ravenstown.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
Get you thinking, think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
Richard, there's a few changes as far as environmental regulations are concerned?
Well, right around New Zealand you're seeing a lot of change in environmental regulation. It was 1991, in fact, the RMA first came into being in New Zealand, but we're probably going through a whole second or third wave of the planning cycle, and what we're seeing is a lot more regulation landing at the farm gate, whether it be in a Canterbury context or in the Horizons, Wanganui Manawatu area. A lot more issues hitting farmers for water quality is the main driver, and regulation particularly around the nitrate leaching from those farms. And what that's leading to in some contexts is quite a lot of farms moving from farming as we know it into farming for via a consent process with the council. And that's a very significant shift for farming, going through that change to actually have to apply for a consent, not just in the past as we would have applied for a consent for, say, dairy shed effluent or maybe irrigation water quantity, but now for the very active farming and working that farming system through to know what's happening in terms of the losses to groundwater or the losses of both phosphorus and nitrogen to water bodies. And that's really giving the regulatory focus for quite a change of thinking for farming right around New Zealand.
I guess, was it the Taieri Valley that started it all? Because they had very strong restrictions, didn't they? Quite some time ago.
Taieri or Taupo?
Taieri was the one that I was thinking of, but probably Taupo as well.
Taupo to me was the one that led the charge, where the lake issue there, keeping a pristine lake, led to the zone around the lake. Quite a bit of central government money going into Taupo to keep the lake as clean as possible, and that actually was the first process of really integrating overseer into regulation. By overseer, what I'm meaning there is the nutrient budgeting model that has been developed over probably 20 years. Mm-hmm. Principally, starting point was around fertiliser recommendations, but now looking more at using the model to look at all the nutrient cycling and the losses in particularly downwards from the nitrogen by the way of nitrate. So back to Taupo, for instance, the focus there was on reducing that, keeping the lake absolutely pristine, and that really went through the court system, and overseer landed as the tool of choice. It's a model that's being developed all the time, and as it's being developed, it goes through new versions. The version changes cause a bit of complexity and can change the landscape for farmers as well. So yeah, interesting place we're in. We're seeing Environment Canterbury taking a lot of steps with their planning changes that are seeing significant numbers of farmers having to consider whether they need a resource consent to intensify, and in many cases the ability to intensify, if it is going to lead to increased nitrogen loss, really doesn't exist. Those what we call red zones through the Canterbury Plains. It's not to say they can't change their system, but if the amount of nitrogen that that system produced increases, then effectively that may be either a non-option or an option that you have to go to council to position a consent for.
It's very complicated.
And unfortunately, every layer that comes along makes it more complicated.
Yeah.
Yes, so we are finding that. So Horizons was probably another council where you'll recall moved into that, I'll call it farming by consent, for a number of the dairy farmers in sensitive catchments, and something in the order of 400 farmers there over the next 2 to 3 years have to go through a system of applying for a resource consent for their existing operation.
So they're already doing it, they're already
without even
practicing.
changing their system, they need to go through a consent process. So that's quite a challenge.
And if they don't get that consent?
Well, we really don't want to go there.
No, okay, that's a big comment.
So they will obviously structure their operation so they will get a consent, and there's some targets by land use capability, classifications of what each land use capability should be driving towards for a lower nitrogen loss. And so farmers have to be consenting their activity and showing a pathway of nutrient reduction, nutrient loss reduction.
And it's up to them to do that?
Well, effectively it's their process to work through. It's their consent that they will hold to run their farm for the next 20, 30 years, and so getting it right is very important.
You, as an organisation, are there to help people with smart maps and such?
Well, Ravensdown's been an interesting place in this development. Firstly, we're kind of been involved with Overseer for a very long time. We have a large field presence of about 70 agri-managers. Now, obviously they're there with fertiliser understanding, nutrient understanding, soils and farm systems understanding. That's really the key to getting the nutrient budget right, both now, maybe as a baseline, and into the future for the different farming scenarios. So we've had to tackle this new emerging space in quite different ways. We set up a team in October 2013, Ravensdown Environmental, which is actually a consultancy service charged by our consultancy. Because the nature of the work was getting more and more specialist and it was unevenly spread across the country between different sectors and different councils, it became virtually unmanageable for Ravensdown to do that as its normal course of business as a service for its farmer shareholders. So we had to pull back from that and say, how do we deliver when a farmer is really having to evaluate their whole farming business and position a resource consent around nutrient loss. So that's where that team started, and it does a lot of work around, if it's in Canterbury, farm sales. So if you're selling a block in Canterbury now, you really have to sell it with its existing nutrient status into the new owner.
That was going to be one of my questions.
So,
because,
due diligence, huge.
And that is the reality now.
Yes,
and
yes.
You've got to have it.
So we're doing that all the time for any, and it's not just farm sales, farm leases will be covered as well, because the incoming lessee has to really do what the lessor, if they were the previous farmer, was doing in terms of nutrient loss. Doesn't mean the system has to be identical, but they may have no headroom to change the nutrient loss. So if you're picturing buying a farm and you had to figure out, well, what's my enterprise going to be? It's not what I imagine it might be, it's what I may be constrained for it to be. And that's takes a lot of thinking through, especially if you're going to the bank and saying, I'm borrowing some money for this new enterprise. Now, the banks are obviously waking up to this quite quickly too and saying, well, we better check this enterprise is going to hold together. Yes.
Lincoln University's dairy unit is already but self-imposed, and they're living, and that's working with you guys.
Yes. What Lincoln University dairy farm has been doing proactively is saying, well, the new regulations coming through in their case for the Selwyn Te Waihora subzone are imposing reductions, and how will that farm manage those reductions? So rather than doing that next year or the year after, they've brought that forward and are trying to do it now. And that's so they're significantly modelling their operation all the time to see if how they'll meet those categories of losses, and then obviously putting that information out for all farmers to look at. And
that's
say,
their website, isn't it?
Website, focus days, all of those sort of extension media they'll be using to get engagement with farmers who are going to have to make similar choices in the next year or 2 or 3.
That's scary.
There's a lot to it, and I don't think we should be scared by it, but we should be very aware of it, because it is fundamental to the business that the farm is operating under. And so just as you plan your carving and plan your rotations and every other farming activity. Here is something you have to do to really model your farming system now and into the future so that it is resilient to the regulatory environment that we now find ourselves in.
Do we see the use of legumes a lot more, or clovers and things to naturally...
Well, it all gets factored into that overseer model, and so it's not so much about how the nitrogen gets there, but how much in total. So, and then what form and how it's been grazed, and the losses you might get from the urine patch, or whether the wintering system is handled in a certain way. That will determine a lot about how the models predict the nitrogen losses. And then you want to set up a system that's robust enough to have a bit of flexibility with the seasonality, but not going to pop you over a certain number that might have the council one day knocking on your door saying, you're having to report these numbers in annually, and if they're starting to not align with the baselines and the predictions, yes, then some tension points are going to develop.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. In just a moment we'll be talking about when you use black fittings. Green is low density, blue, in some cases black and white, is medium. When do we use the total black?
Okay, so this is the RX compression fitting, and in fact up until about the year 2000, something like that, almost all of the municipal pipes in New Zealand were high density, and in fact a lot of rural areas also have a lot of high density installed in their properties, because you had low density, which was a low pressure pipe range, and then you had high density which covered up to 175 psi, something like that, or 12 bar.
The bar being the height and...
Yeah, so 12 bar is 120 metres of head, roughly.
Is that what we're talking about with irrigation schemes and water schemes in the rural sector?
Very much. We're talking about elevational change. Anytime we've got elevational change, we've either got to pump the water up, or we're pumping the water down, or the water's gravitationally flowing down. Every time we've got 10 metres of difference, we've got something like 14.7 psi change.
So we're looking at these, people say, well, the tank is filled because I'm on the Chertsey scheme or the whatever scheme. That's all part of, and they've been around for a long time.
That's right. I mean, they're schemes that probably originally would have had high density pipe in it. So very likely to have these sorts of fittings. Now these fittings, the RX compression range, does 15mm, or the old half-inch pipe, up to 40mm or inch and a half in low density. It also does the same range from 15 to 50mm in high density.
And also we've got the fact that in the old days you did it with the internal bit.
Internal dimension, yes, correct. For example,
nothing confuses us more, but it's okay.
A 2-inch high density pipe, for instance, is 60.4mm OD. Okay, in metric, the closest would be 63 OD. In low density would be 56.6 OD. You confused yet?
Yep, that's okay.
Right. So
I can contact one of your suppliers and they'll explain it to me.
Absolutely. So older systems, as a product for older properties, this is not a bad solution, because it covers low density up to 40mm and all of the high densities up to 50mm. Slightly different fitting arrangement as compared to low density, in that we, in this case, need to chamfer the end of the pipe.
Yep.
So we're going to pare off a small amount on the top of this pipe. We're doing it nice and evenly. Now this aids the product pushing past the O-ring in the fitting.
So these have got O-rings in them?
Yeah. If we, for instance, take this apart, we've got a nut that fits on the outside of the pipe. We've got a grip ring which holds the pipe from pulling out of the fitting. We've got a sleeve, and in this case we've got an O-ring. So what we're doing in this particular case is, once again, the nut is loose. And then we simply insert this. You can feel that that's up to the O-ring. And then we're pushing that past the O-ring right up to the end. And then doing this up. And in this case, we'd need to use a pipe wrench just to give that an extra tighten. But the sealing is done by the O-ring on the outside surface of the pipe. So whether that's low density, in this case, or high density, the effect is the same.
So if somebody puts a fork through it while they're doing something in a veggie garden, you need to put one of these in to repair it.
Yeah, and in fact, if you've done that in a veggie garden like that, you're going to need more than one fitting. So don't just pick one, you would need at least two.
You need two?
Yeah, because when the pipe's sitting in the ground and you've got a hole in it, you need to cut it and slide a fitting in and have enough room to actually pull it up out of the ground to get it back in. So it's a much bigger task than just fixing that hole.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're putting a new tank in, or putting a new trough in, the same sort of thing?
Same sort of thing if you wanted a fitting off it. There are other solutions like tapping saddles where we could actually bolt a saddle on to fix a small hole like that. But that's another story, another time.
And when somebody puts a fork through it and they come into one of your suppliers, what are they asking for?
They'd be, if they knew the pipe was old pipe, then they would ask for an RX compression fitting. And in 99% of the cases, it'll fix it. There was some small amounts of other pipe outside of the normal standard that were also manufactured. You need to be aware, but it's your best guess.
And in that stage, you were actually measuring the inside hole, not the outside diameter.
Yeah, or as we said earlier, taking a sample of the pipe into the rural company and getting them to determine that for you.
Does actually remove some of the problem, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
After the break, it's the dairying woes and foreign ownership.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
I guess most people are looking at dairying and not through rose-coloured glasses.
Well, it's a bit of a downturn, but commodities do have cycles, and the ones who will come through, whether they're long established or new, are those who've been prudent about their planning and budgeting. Two things from my time as a Member of Parliament. I had a farming couple in the Ikamatua area on an old Land Survey settlement block. They were the only farming couple on the west coast that I can recall who went through when the subsidies were withdrawn. But they were so great, you know, I went to see them and they had no blame for anybody else but themselves, because they knew that the subsidies were artificial, they knew that they'd taken too big a leap of faith, and they're just the sort of guys who I hope were very successful in coming back into the industry later on. And the other example I have about being prudent is when the weather bomb hit South Canterbury in 1986, the Cabinet set up a committee which Geoffrey Palmer chaired, and he reported to us that it was astonishing the high levels of equity which those farmers had. They were canny and careful, and I suspect that it's not like that today. But they were running at 85–90% equity almost across the board.
And
20 years ago.
I mean, you hear some horrendous stories about the debt loading that some are having. I mean, it's sort of very close to three figures.
Yes, indeed, and partly the banks should have perhaps been more careful in lending, but it looked pretty good. And you know, as the old Warren Buffett saying, you know who's naked when the tide goes out.
That is an interesting saying.
And from my life earlier as an English teacher, the wonderful poem Ode to Autumn by John Keats, where he talks about the end of summer, but the little buzzy animals and so on around the place have behaved as if warm days will never cease. But warm days do cease. They come back again, but hopefully as many as possible get through this without having to come down a step, maybe go back into share milking as a percentage farmer. At least in dairying there are those options available, whereas in a lot of other businesses you make some unwise decisions and there's nowhere else to go except out.
People naturally will want to blame somebody, and I guess people will blame the banks, but you know, if you're obese because you buy a whole lot of food, you can't blame the grocer, can you?
No, you can't. No, you can't. And the blame lies in many places. Perhaps Fonterra's not sufficiently into value-added commodities, but markets anticipate events, and once the European Union people looked around the world and thought, well, all these guys are going gangbusters producing, and we've got our farmers on tight controls and limitations, just the very mention that they were going to withdraw those, immediately no more increase in production. But the very mention that their subsidies and their production level regimes were going to be amended, that affected the market.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea that you're saying go back. You know, I mean, if you're overdone, if you get out, start at the bottom again and come back up.
Yeah, I mean that opportunity's there, I think, for farmers who've only just got in, who've onto their own land. With their own herds, they've perhaps borrowed more than they should because they thought that, well, they knew that $8.40 a kilo wasn't ever going to last, but they might have thought that $6 or $5.50, somewhere around there. But now they're down at the mid $4. If they have to take a step or two back to become a 25 or 40 or 50% share milker, then at least they can get back on a ladder.
They can claw their way back up again.
Yep.
Foreign ownership, that's another one of those subjects we shouldn't probably be talking about, but we're going to.
Well, yeah, I mean,
So don't mention the war, isn't it?
I was the Minister of Immigration in 1986 who introduced the multicultural policy. I think we had 33 migrants from China the year before, and then several hundred after, and so it's gone on from all across the groups who were not entitled to come to live here before. So, you know, I don't have any issue with multiculturalism and the migration from those various countries. I think what the issue has been is that some people in countries like ours, Britain's another example, where wealthy people in other countries see that as a sort of currency hedge where they put money into more stable markets. The classic example in London would be Russian billionaires. They buy hugely valuable properties there. So do people from the Middle East, because there's political security as well as financial security in Britain, as there is on our own scale in New Zealand. And I just thought that if 40% of the buyers in a particular period of time, 3 months, whatever it was, people who appear to be from China, whereas the Chinese only make up 9% of the Auckland market, and most of them are actually below the median wage, so they're not the people who are buying the highly valuable houses. I just reckon that that's an issue and it's got to be looked at. We wouldn't be able to do that in China. They can't do it in Australia. They've got to build a house if you're offshore. You've got to, so we've got to be for investment, but as I see it, foreign investment which only cranks up the price of commodities or products which have already been there is not the best sort of investment. We should be looking at investment coming into new, innovative activities which grow our economy, not just by what's already there.
Because our dollar and interest rate has been very, very good at making sure that a lot of overseas funds are coming in.
Yes.
I mean, we were more financial than we were production-wise at one point.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a free economy, and when I was in the cabinet, we floated the currency, and now everybody's going around saying what a great thing this floating currency is because it gives us the buffer. It falls as adverse events occur, and it rises when times are better. So I'm all for that kind of flexibility, and that is a good thing for the economy.
I'm a bit confused about this sort of witch hunt in Auckland at the moment, and if you've got a Chinese name. I mean, there's Malcolm Ching is a New Zealander,
yes.
He looks like me. So yeah, was that sort of a publicity stunt, or what was behind that?
No, well, I think there is a genuine issue in Auckland and the property market with buyers from offshore who don't intend to live in New Zealand, and who they might have their kids at school or university down here for a period of time, and then the capital gain when they sell and go, that's covered all the university fees or all the tuition fees. Now, at least they've been occupied, but there are places there which are being bought by offshore investors which are not occupied. They're just there because in Auckland last year prices went up 150,000 a year.
And so they're buying it, leaving it, and getting the capital gain.
Yes, yeah.
So,
and
I can understand that, but
well, it's good if you've got the money to get in there, and if you can, but we would not be allowed to do that in China. In fact, we're not allowed to do that in many other countries as well. You've got to be a citizen or a resident, or have some entitlement.
Because is there a solution to that Auckland market going up and up and up?
It has happened before where it's crashed here. Yeah. It reaches a point, I can recall in the 90s, there were places which had been on the market for $750,000. That's just a run-of-the-mill price now, but they were top of the market then. There was a crash somewhere about 94, 95, and they were then being sold for $350,000, $370,000. So it does crash.
And for no reason, it would just seem it has got to the top of the market and then boom.
Just gets to yeah, that's right. Yeah, just like all commodity cycles, and housing is a commodity, but normally housing is better, and for most of the New Zealand, it's fine. I mean, it wobbles sometimes, but generally it increases in value more slowly but consistently. But Auckland does tend to rise and fall.
Have we got the rural farming ownership sorted out for foreign owners?
I don't know. That'll be a matter of ongoing political debate. I'm pretty sure about that. Where a foreign buyer can add value to New Zealand's basic infrastructure and industrial and commercial infrastructure, then that should be allowed. But by adding value, I don't mean buying a house and painting it, and then that's not what I mean. But if you can bring new technology, I mean, we're allowed to invest in many countries in the business world, but not less so in farming. But if there are people offshore who can bring skills and talent and innovation to New Zealand industries, including agriculture, then we should be doing that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, Rob.
Don't forget you can see Kerry's interview on our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed On the Land, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.